own band director, Mr. Garcia, is joining us today on this very special episode of the DayDream Podcast. Welcome, Mr. Garcia. Welcome.
Thank you very much for the welcome.
All right, how are you doing on this very fine day?
I'm doing pretty good. It's Monday, but nowadays with the quarantine, a lot of the days seem the same. Feel the same, I should say. So it's Monday, but it doesn't feel like a Monday. It just kind of feels like every other day, I guess.
That is true. That is true. All right, so we're gonna ask you some questions. If you don't feel comfortable answering some of these questions, that's all good with us. My
Uh,
first question for you is, what was it like living in a poor neighborhood and a Hispanic household when you were young? Because I know you always told us about stories about how you couldn't wait to not be poor and like how you always wanted to get out of college and earn some money because you were tired of being poor. So what was it like living in that situation?
yeah, well, it's interesting because I lived in a neighborhood that was very poor. There was a gang kind of down our street, and I guess I won't mention the streets just in case, but definitely, in the downtown Anaheim area, they're kind of by Glover Stadium, give or take. And on that street, there were gangs, so we couldn't be out late in the afternoon. And then I actually grew up in a home where we only had one room. So our house wasn't even a house with like different bedrooms. So I didn't grow up with my own room. I didn't even grow up with my own room sharing with my brothers. It was like all of us together in one room. And so that was always kind of like, you watch the movies, you watch TV, and you watch people saying, "Oh, go to your room" or whatever. And I thought, we don't even have a room. And so our room was kind of the same living area as everybody else's. And then you can kind of see the kitchen from our bed and that whole thing. So it was tough. But of course, I understood why. I mean, my parents would do a good job of explaining the fact that they immigrated from Mexico and they came here to find a better life. And so the fact that they were making sacrifices, that's all they could give us. So that means growing up, that was one of the things that, looking back, now I live in a home in a nice neighborhood with my wife, and we have extra rooms, and we have a yard, and we have a pool and stuff like that. And so it's really kind of a big change from the way I grew up. But I think it was always good to keep that in mind because it helped me think, you know what, I don't want to be poor, and it sucks. It sucks to be poor, but at the same time, there's nothing wrong with it. I loved growing up close to family. That's the other thing. It's nice to be close with everybody. When people live in these big houses and everybody has their own room, sometimes they don't see each other, or they get a chance to escape from other people. Well, we grew up with each other whether we liked it or not. So that was part of the family bond. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
All right, jump in anyone if you want to
Yeah, jump
ask
in.
questions.
Um, hey, Mr. Garcia.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing good. Uh, One question for me is, you have any pet peeves that like something that just like annoys you, like something over the top?
Hmm, that's a good question. Uh, this is gonna sound bad, but my pet peeve, really, really, is stupid people. Like, that's one of the things that just really annoys me when there's people that just do stupid things. And by that I don't mean act stupid or silly or anything like that, because I think it's fun to have humor and to have fun with life. But I'm just saying, when people just don't get something and they're not willing to get something, I think that's what in my eyes kind of makes them like stupid. It's like, hey, why are you being stupid? So I think other than that, it's not really. I mean, I'm pretty patient with a lot of other things.
Yeah, we've
All
seen your
right.
patience being tested more than once before. So
Yeah. Why? Like, for example, what are some of your pet peeves? Because I know there's a couple of you on this podcast. So tell me, for example, like, what annoys some of you?
for me, I guess it's the same thing with you. People like acting
Yeah.
stupid. It's
Yeah,
like come on, man. Like why don't you see that? Like, why aren't you having common sense? I
Right.
guess that.
Yeah, same here. Like,
you get to see that on the daily at school.
pretty much. Like, like why have a brain if you're not even gonna use it?
Right.
I'm gonna be real. I don't know what my pet
Yeah.
peeves are, but like I know a lot of things get on my nerves like all the time.
Like what? For example, like what?
Uh, I, don't-
Answer
It's
my
hard to
question.
describe. But it's most of the time it's just stupid people. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Don't worry, Carlos. This call is confidential.
It's okay. We have like 4 viewers. It's fine.
5, okay.
Oh, okay. All right, my bad. I'm sorry that I updated.
So, Mr. Garcia,
Yeah.
you been binge watching any shows lately? Now that we're stuck indoors all day.
You know what? Again, I don't like to watch a lot of TV because, I mean, when I'm working or when we're doing stuff, I like to use my time more productively, usually, right? But yeah, in this situation, because we've been forced to kind of stay indoors and all that, and they're asking us to keep our distance from people, and I've been trying to do some stuff around the house and just keep myself busy with other things. But when I do sit down to watch TV, and sometimes, yeah, you just kind of get stuck on the couch or whatever, and you start watching stuff. I've watched a lot of movies. As far as shows, not too many. I've actually been watching Malcolm in the Middle a lot,
Oh,
and I think
Oh,
that was
classic.
it's been a while.
And the funny thing is, because I actually have never watched it from beginning to end, so I would watch episodes here and there throughout the years, and then it just kind of came up, and yeah, I've been watching some of that. I started The Simpsons again, so I started that from the beginning, and
Carlos.
and it's funny. As a kid, I loved The Simpsons, but then, I mean, I still do. It's one of my favorite shows. But then watching those first couple episodes that came out like back in the '90s or whatever, like it's hard to get through some of those things that are like really like early animation, and it's just like, oh man, this thing is like super simple compared to the stuff we watch now.
I feel you.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I
so
restarted The
but
Simpsons too. It's
oh,
it's
that's
weird.
awesome. And they're so clever. I love The Simpsons because there's a lot of things in there that are very adult like. So that means there's some things where they make fun of, the government, or they make fun of things or pop stars or whatever else. They're very satirical, and I like that.
Yeah, I think that's the charm that pulls me into the earlier episodes. They have like no
Yeah.
filter to make jokes.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And especially nowadays with people being oversensitive with jokes and stuff like that, I think they could get away with a lot of things that maybe now aren't so acceptable, I guess. And so I like that.
On that note, how do you feel about South Park and Family Guy and those types of shows?
Oh, see, that's funny because I didn't watch a lot of South Park growing up, and I know it's been around for a while, but I think right, 'cause it was on Comedy Central, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So at one point it was on Comedy Central, and you couldn't watch it unless you had like cable television. And going back to me growing up poor, we never grew up with cable television, so I didn't know about South Park until like I think I was like in college or something. And so then, but some of those episodes are just they're funny. You just can't help it. Like they make fun of so many different things, and like I remember the Black Friday episode. There's like an episode on Black Friday, and how
Yes, that
everybody's
one.
going out and like trampling each other to like buy stuff on Black Friday, and so
I feel
some
you.
of them are
Yeah.
really funny.
Not gonna lie, I saw that episode like last week.
Oh,
It
you
was just
did?
very
See?
yeah. It was on Comedy Central, and I was like, you know what? I'll watch one episode, and it was that one. I was like, oh my god,
Yeah,
such a good one.
it is. There's some that are just really funny. Some of those episodes, I'm telling you, it's cartoons that are animation or whatever, but it's really adult humor, and it's kind of like it reminds me of like Toy Story. And I know this is a podcast, so I don't know who's gonna hear it, but it reminds me of. I think you'll understand what I'm saying. Like Toy Story, there's an episode where I think Buzz Lightyear like sees a girl and he gets excited, so like his wings expand.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
That's
one
like-
way to show
Right.
yourself.
That's like if a kid is watching it, they don't get it, but
Yeah.
if somebody older's watching it, you're like, oh man, that's hilarious. So
Pixar is known for doing a lot of those.
yeah. So that's the thing. That's why I enjoy some of the shows that even though they're animated, some of them are fun to kind of read between the lines or again see the adult humor in it rather than just the kid storyline or whatever.
Yeah. For
But
those of you viewers watching at home, if you want to ask a question to Mr. Garcia, feel free to in the chat below. Ivan and Luis are monitoring chat, so feel free to ask whenever you guys want to.
yeah, just chat away. See what else comes up.
Moving off of like
All right.
the funny stuff and going into a semi-serious question.
Okay.
Eric Lopez asks in chat if we're gonna still have Bandcamp.
Yeah, semi-serious question on Bandcamp. It's still very much to be determined. The good news is that this week, both our district in Anaheim and the LA Unified School District both posted or announced that we are going to start school as scheduled. That doesn't mean that we're going to start it the same way. That's what we're still waiting on. So right now, it's looking better than it was like last week, but at the same time, we don't know. And so it all depends on whether they tell us if we can start school and do our normal stuff. So I would say right now it's still 50-50 as of May 4th today or whatever the day is. Yeah.
Interesting. All right.
All right, question coming from me. What inspired you to become the man you are today?
Oh, that's a good question. I think um, I think it's definitely parenting, and I say that because um, my parents, going back to what I was telling you guys as far as growing up poor and growing up in a house that was just one room basically, um, we learned to appreciate a lot of things, but my parents always motivated us to do our best and always valued education. So they said, no, no matter what, you always have to go to school. If we had to do chores, they would say, no, no, don't do your chores, do your homework first. Like they would always let us do what we needed to do for school. So I think parenting was number one. Our parents always cared about what we were doing. Now, sometimes that was annoying. Sometimes especially when you're like in sixth grade and seventh grade and eighth grade, and you want to go to like the junior high dance at Sycamore or something like that, and your parents like are all overprotective. Sometimes that was annoying, but at the same time, it was a good thing because they always were involved in what we were doing. So that was the first thing, and then the second thing I would say would be a lot of mentors and teachers that I've had along the way, and that's why I decided to be a teacher. And because between my parents always caring about education, and then my teachers always teaching me well and guiding me in the right direction, I think that led me to be the man I am today. So I think like the responsibility and the discipline and all those things, I think they come from my parents because they really imposed that on us and always showed us how important those things were. But then once it came to actually being, knowing things and being on the right track, because, my parents didn't go to college or high school, or my dad finished, I think, third grade in elementary school in Mexico. So then my parents would go to like open house or back to school night and not even know what it was about, but they were there. My parents would go to a parent teacher conference and they weren't able to speak English to our teachers that were speaking English, but at least they were there. So they were always there, but then it was up to our teachers to take us the rest of the way. And I think the city of Anaheim and the Anaheim school system did a good job and pushed us forward. And I say us, me and my brothers. And then, of course, once you go to college, and then your mind gets expanded and open in different ways. And then again, you have people that influence you differently, and you make mistakes along the way. You learn from them, and then you end up having your own set of beliefs and philosophies that make you who you are. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very true. Very agreeable too, because no, I feel like a lot. I feel like all ideas and like ideologies and philosophies and like you said, come from parents, and parents pass that down from their parents, and they pass that down from their parents. I guess it's just like generational
Yeah.
between.
No, it totally is. It totally is. It's like I think about the man I am has a lot to do with my dad because I'm male and he's male and we just happen to have a lot of things similar. But then I think, oh well, my grandpa, his dad, must have passed on some things to him, and then his dad must have passed on some things to him. And so I think that's one of the things that you're right. It's absolutely right. Um, but even if it wasn't my dad, then my mom, and that's why you have two parents. And then for people that don't have two parents, I was lucky to have two parents. But some people that don't have two parents, well, one parent can still do it. It's just a matter of us kids wanting to listen, because of course we all go through it. We don't want to listen to our parents, but they are right, even though we don't like to admit that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, we all feel that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, all right. Question for me.
Yeah.
So, despite you being poor and not living in a great environment, did you have any childhood memories at all? Like any fun activities?
Oh man, that one's a tough one because our fun activities consisted in we always looked forward on Saturdays to go grocery shopping. And I know that sounds weird, but that's one of the things I remember because yeah, we didn't have the money to. I think when I grew up, like the first time I went to Disneyland, I think I was a freshman in high school, and that's because we went with the band, you know. And so it's like we didn't have the money to do those type of things, even though I think everybody in the world probably thinks that us Anaheim kids go to Disneyland like all the time because we live there, you know. But that's a false statement. But
It's a tough life
so
here.
yeah, right. So we hardly ever did those things, but what we did was like grocery shopping on Saturdays. So my dad would work all week, my mom would stay at home. She didn't work, and then on Saturdays it was a matter of like, hey, let's go grocery shopping. So that means that was kind of like our weekly outing. We would go out. My mom would grocery shop. We would go with her, and then afterwards or before I can't remember, we would always go to like El Pollo Loco or something, and that was like the big thing. It was like, hey, you know what? It's the weekend. We're gonna like treat ourselves and go like out to. For us, it was a restaurant, quote unquote. You know, I'm doing like air quotes, a restaurant, but it was a fast food. El Pollo Loco is not really a restaurant, but yeah, that's where we went, and we had a family meal, and then other than that, I just remember just kind of being in the car. Sometimes we would go and just visit places, but of course, places that didn't require like admission to go in and stuff like that. So sometimes we would just drive to the park or go out to the beach, even though we never got into the water. But then we would like drive back and stuff like that. So yeah, it was kind of poor type of entertainment.
All right. I was gonna ask a question about that.
Yeah.
Um, I was gonna ask. It's it's not important, but I was just gonna ask, what will you get from Pollo Loco?
Yeah. Funny you mention it.
I mean, it's in the name.
Yes. No, but we would always get the family chicken, like the 8 or 10 piece chicken
Mm.
for all of us. And then my favorite piece from El Pollo Loco, believe it or not, was always the wing. And I like the wing because it was extra crispy. And even to this day, when I go and I order um, a steak or chicken or something, I like everything well done and well cooked. And so I like the wing because that's the one that had like the most, to me, like the charbroiled flavor. But we would just get the chicken family meal. It wasn't like we all got like chicken burritos or things like that. We just, and that's the other thing. Growing up with our family, it was always like, look, this is what we're gonna buy. You either eat it or don't eat. It's not like we were allowed to like choose something from the menu. That wasn't until again maybe we were in eighth grade or in high school we started to be like, oh, I want like a number two or a number three or whatever that is. It was just like, look, we're buying chicken, dig in, and that's what you get.
Wow, that's I didn't think it was that extreme that you guys didn't choose what you guys wanted to eat. Wow.
I mean, the family meal
Yeah,
isn't that bad.
Yeah,
It's not.
yeah,
yeah,
but
Slaps.
that's tough. Wow, it's interesting.
So
yeah. It is, huh?
you
Uh,
mentioned those drives in the car.
yeah.
Like how was the what was the furthest you've been in the most beautiful place seen after?
Oh, that's actually an interesting question. And when I say drive, it's not like we took road trips necessarily,
Hmm.
because again, that's people that take road trips have like money to like travel,
Hmm.
but that's even if it's a road trip, that's costs money. But I do remember when I was like 10 years old, the big trip that we took was to Las Vegas. And I remember that because we went. I think one of my uncles was like, "Oh, we'll have to go to Vegas, and we'll have to, go out there." And must have been in the middle of the 90s or early 90s. And then we went to Vegas, but it was one of those things where we went as a family. So there was four of us or five of us. I can't remember if my little brother was born yet. um, and then their family went. So it was two families. We went to Las Vegas. We drove over there. We stayed at the Circus, which is still one of the hotels that's there, which is totally like beat up and all that because it was one of the cheapest ones and the only place you can stay as a kid, because they have like games rather than like gambling. They have a lot of like carnival games. And so that was the biggest trip that we took. And I remember that because we went and we all stayed like in one room. Going back to being poor, it was just we went, and then the other family went, and then we all split one room, and so there was like 10 of us in one room at the hotel, um, and then we drove back, and that was memorable again because we were together. But other than that, yeah, we weren't taking road trips like overnight. That's the If I remember correctly, that would have been the only time we went somewhere and like stayed in a hotel, at least here in the United States. When we went, um, when we went to Mexico, well, that was different because there's family over there, so we stayed at people's houses, or my parents used to have a little house over there as well. Um, and we did go to TJ a lot because
Mm.
that's another thing too that I don't know how many people can relate to this, but we didn't grow up with health insurance, so that means every time somebody got sick, I was like, okay, let's go. We're going to Tijuana. We're going to go ahead and go to the doctor there because here we couldn't afford the doctors because it was so much more expensive. And then in Tijuana, because of the peso and the dollar and the exchange rate and all that, things are cheaper to us because you're taking the U.S. dollar over there. So
Hmm.
that was the trip we took a lot. Was actually the one to Tijuana to go get medicine, to go to the doctor, that kind of thing. Yeah, it was never really just to do fun things, but it was never like people would. Because I know people go to Tijuana sometimes and go to like Rosarito and there's like nice beaches over there and stuff to like do for fun. We
Yeah.
would just go to like take care of business, if you know what I mean, doctor,
Yeah.
medicine, and then come back.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, of course.
Oh.
Has
So
All
that,
Ivan
right.
asked a question?
So
yeah.
I'm reading chat at the moment, and
Okay.
Daniel
But Ivan.
Escobar,
Oh, what's
he
up, Daniel?
asked, he
Oh my
asked
God, no.
if
Oh.
He asked,
Mr.
right?
Garcia has ever been to a drive-in theater.
I have been to a drive-in theater. Yeah, it's been a while. I remember going. I think it was in college, so that would have been maybe like 15 years ago. I went to a drive-in theater out in Riverside, and I'm pretty sure I went with my older brother, and somebody was like, "Hey, let's go to a drive-in theater." Because for those of you, and I know some of, I mean, I shouldn't say some of you, most of you that are listening, there was a drive-in theater right where the Lowe's is right now, where the Lowe's is in on Lemon and the 91 freeway.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Right there,
Uh-huh.
that
Yeah.
big lot in the Curacao. There used to be a swap meet there, and they also used to be a drive-in theater because drive-in theater used to be swap meets. They used to, use those on the weekends for swap meets. Um, but no, I didn't go to that one because as a kid, that one disappeared before I was able to drive and all of that. So we had to go out to one in Riverside, and I don't remember what movie it was. And it was one of those things where you go to the drive-in theater, you set your car to like the radio station that they're playing the soundtrack on, and you just sit in the car and you watch the movie. Yeah,
Oh, that's how they do it. I always
yeah,
wondered how they like
Mm.
play the movies like in a huge screen with
Yeah.
sound
yeah.
and all that.
Right. Well, seeing the old ones, what they used to do was you pulled up to like the car spot, and there was a speaker that you grabbed and you put like on your window, and so that's how you could hear
Mm.
the sound. But then again, by the time I went to it, which was again like 15 years ago, then they just gave you like the radio station and said, here, go into this radio station that's specific for to like our movie soundtrack, and that's how you could hear it. So I'm sure if there is a drive-in theater now, they probably have something more advanced than that. But that's how it was. Yeah,
Dang, that's really interesting.
yeah.
All right, question for
What else?
me. How
Uh-huh.
was the college life? After
It was a lot of fun just because I love the liberty of it. I think more than anything, I love the fact that going back to what I was telling you guys, the way I grew up, my parents didn't want us to do things, and they didn't necessarily let us go to parties or to hang out with people because they were protective. And again, it's not a bad thing. They just didn't know any better, and they wanted to make sure we were going to be okay and not get into drugs and drinking and stuff like that. So then, so by the time we got to college, then they figure, okay, well, you're 18 already, so you must have some sense of common sense. So you're not going to mess us up too bad. And so then they let us do whatever we wanted to, and that part of it I think was a lot of fun, just being trusted with that. And then of course you drive, so then you go and you do whatever you want whenever you want. And then college is one of those things that classes end sometimes like at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, so sometimes you're there all day, and so you have the liberty of kind of creating your own life. Yeah.
wow, all right.
Interesting, wow.
Yeah, any specific questions on that?
how was life like with the symphonians? Because I know you always told us stories about those, especially
Mm.
this year specifically because of what we played. So how was life like with them?
Yeah, well, and see, one of the things that makes college so much different than high school, other than the fact that you're with adults, right? Again, you have young men and women, not just boys and girls, but is the fact that they're big universities. So when I went to Cal State Fullerton, there's 27,000 people um, at Cal State Fullerton. Right now, I think there's like 35,000 people there. So what you need to do is you still need to find a group to belong to. Right now, if you're listening to this podcast, chances are you're part of the band in Color Guard. And so that means you have a group of people, you have a family, you have people that we hang out with. But in college, it's hard to do that. So that means that's why the fraternities and sororities exist in college. It's so that you get together with a group of people that have similar interests or similar backgrounds. Because there's fraternities for like just Hispanic men or Hispanic women. There's fraternities for Black African American men and women. There's Asian fraternities, and then there's fraternities that have to do with science and math and PE or whatever. So I was part of the Symphonians, which is Phi Mu Alpha Symphonia, and that means that that fraternity is a nationwide fraternity that had music students in it, specifically men that are music students. So it was a fraternity, which is for men, where sororities are for women, and so that means that that group of men was my very close group of friends going through college, and so that means that whenever there was like we have a party with the band, we have a Halloween party, right? Um, so then that means that if you're in college, if Halloween came around, well, we hosted a Halloween party also, and so we had the college version of that, and so that means that made it a lot of fun, and it made you belong to some group, but also made you connect with new people. And not to mention that, I mean, I still had all my friends from high school, and especially my friends from the band, because those are still my closest friends, even 20 years later. Um, and so you always have to keep those. But then when you gain new friends, that's a good way to do it, is by joining a group that will kind of foster that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Any
Question,
questions from chat? Update on chat?
bro.
Oh, because there were some questions we had. Here, let
All right, thanks, Ivan and
The,
Luis, for
me
checking
the
the chat.
stream cut. The stream cut, so we lost all the questions.
Oh, so
Okay.
Josh, the drum major from Western High School, says
Oh,
he
yeah.
wishes you were his band director.
Oh,
Wow.
that's
Oh, really?
awesome.
check.
Well,
That's cool.
That wasn't a
if that
question, but I mean that's very nice and all.
Yeah, it's just a comment. And then he said, I have a lot of respect for you guys and wish you the best of luck next season.
Oh, well, that's very kind of Josh is his name, right?
Yeah.
That's very kind of him. And you know what? And for that matter, even though I don't know him, if he wishes I was his band director, well, then I wish he was my student too. Because, and I say that not to be cheesy or corny, but just because of the fact that it's nice to have a group and a band and color guard team and family where people want to be there and everybody wants to be involved in the same way. And so that's what makes it so much fun. Of course, we get together and we perform and we work hard and we try to do our best and get a score and a trophy and all that stuff. But really, what makes it fun, even if we didn't get any of the awards, what makes it fun is that everybody wants to be there and gets along. And again, that's part of the family bond. And going back to what I was saying earlier, even growing up poor, that's what makes it fun. Is the fact that you're all together, even if you don't have these big luxurious things. And so that's exciting for him to say that. So thank you, I appreciate that. And so a shout out to any of the other, in case there's any other band members or anybody else from other schools.
I
That's
saw Eric in the chat, and he asked a question.
Yes, a lot of
Like-
questions.
Yeah, like we said, you don't have to answer the question if you don't feel comfortable with the question.
that's fine.
So Eric Hymas asks, what has your love life been like?
What has my love life been like? Well, that's a fun question. I will summarize it without going into any details, because one thing that I've learned through the years is that you never know who's listening, or you never know where this information will go. And I will tell you, one of the fun things about being a teacher at Anaheim High School, and then also have gone to Anaheim High School is that there are some teachers on campus that could probably tell you who my girlfriend or friends were in high school,
Oh.
or there's people that are in
Multiple
the
people. Oh,
community.
okay.
Yeah, well, yeah. And then in my community, um, also people that were in the band that now, I mean, there's students in the band right now that I was in band with them in high school, right? So because I'm part of the community, some people know some things about me, I guess, because we grew up together, and that's totally fine. So going back to Eric's question about my love life, um, let's see, my first official girlfriend, not just like a girl that like I had a crush on or anything like that, would have been in fifth grade, and that's when I first learned like what that kind of meant. And
What a player.
right, well, I don't know.
A
I don't know.
real
I
man.
like this girl, and
So
so
smooth.
that was fun because it was the first time that it was like, oh, you get to call somebody your girlfriend, and then that means at the time, you know, you talk on the phone and things like that. Um, and then once I got to junior high, then of course those relationships start getting more involved because then you have, you know, like I think we had like the Valentine's dance that was called the was it the sweetheart dance or something like that. And so you ask somebody to go to the dance with you, or at the time we had a sock hop, I think. And anyway, so you know, you start kind of, there's opportunities now to like ask someone to go to the dance with you. And so I did have another girlfriend that was in band. She actually played trumpet in junior high, and so that was cool. But then we both moved into high school, and then we moved on, you know. And so then I had another girlfriend at the time, then from, you know, in high school, and she was a lot of fun. Then we broke up with her. Then I had another girlfriend that was in the color guard, actually. And so then that's when the relationships changed, because then I went to college, and we both went to college. So again, one big thing that happened when you, or what happens when you go to college, like I'm telling you, is like you have your own life, you have a new set of friends. So a lot of things change. Not necessarily it's a bad thing, but they do change. So unfortunately, we grew apart once we got to college, and so then I had a different girlfriend in college. And so as you know, you kind of, as you change phases in life, then that's when you change um, relationships, and you grow, and sometimes you grow together and sometimes you grow apart. It's a lot of fun when you're growing together because you share experiences with somebody, and sometimes it's not so much fun when you grow apart because then you have to kind of start all over. But my philosophy is this: I've never had a girlfriend that a new girlfriend that wasn't better than the last one. And I say that out of respect to all my ex girlfriends. But what I mean is, like, you break up with somebody, and then the next person you go out with, well, they're going to be better than the person you broke up with, because you broke up with them for a reason. You know, something didn't click, something wasn't working. So then the next time, you know, you ask somebody out and you start a relationship, then logically speaking, they're going to be better because now they have something that you were looking for. And so, yeah, and so now I am happily married with Mrs. Jennifer Garcia, and she is great, and I love her to death, and she makes me really happy, and so that's life. Yeah,
Nice.
Yeah.
That
there you go.
was
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
Summarize it
That's a
all.
dub. That's a dub.
Speaking of you two, I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Is there any possibility in the near future for you to have a child by any chance?
Wow. You know what? That is a really good question, and I will tell you that there is a very good possibility
Oh my God,
of, yeah,
yes.
me and Mrs. Garcia having
Yes.
children in the near future. Yes.
Ah, children. All right, all right.
And that is exciting. It's a very exciting thought, I have to tell you.
Yes, Garcia Jr. Here we come.
Yes. Yep.
All right.
Yeah. So,
Good to hear that.
You've led an exciting life.
yeah.
Definitely.
Well, you know what? And then when life brings something, throws something at you, you just have to take it and tackle it. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But I think it's just a matter of over the years you learn to be positive with life. I think the people that don't end up happy is because they don't want to be happy. It's because they don't want to they find the flaws in everyone or in everything. And so that goes back to being optimistic. And I know it sounds weird because we do the rocks lesson and all that, but the optimistic part is really important, I think, because if you don't value all the good things in life and look forward to even better things in life, well, then that sucks. I mean, you have to look forward to good things. Nobody should be looking forward to bad things because that's depressing. So, yeah, we have to be optimistic. I
True that. True that. All right, Mr. Garcia. So you always tell us if you were king of the world, you would
Yeah.
do this, you would do that.
Uh-huh.
So if you were king of the world, what would you do? It doesn't have to be anything band related. Doesn't have to be anything related at all.
Oh,
Anything. If you were king of the world, what would you do?
Literally, your imagination.
wow. That's a good question. Well, I'll answer the first one is going to be real simple. I can go into it really deep, but I won't. But I think if I were king of the world, every child would experience the joy of learning how to play an instrument and make music. And I say that because it's an expensive dream because the instruments are expensive and of course some schools don't have that, but I think like everybody like in second or third grade should already learn how to play something just for fun, even if they don't continue on with it, because that joy is something that going back to happiness and optimism, I think music makes our lives better no matter which way you put it, even if it's dark music, even if it's music that makes you, I'm going to call it sad, but you know what I mean, that makes your mood kind of go down. I think that's still very valuable for humanity. But anyway, I'm going to move on from that one because that one could get really deep. But the other thing that sometimes does bother me a lot, that if I were king of the world, I would try to cut how much we waste in the world. And by that, I mean this something simple like if there are people that don't want to go to school, I think we should allow them not to go to school. Why do they come and waste people's time and waste space and all of that? I think people should just be like, you know what? I don't want to go to school. Fine. Well, then that means they have to go work and do something productive for society. But I don't think we waste a lot of resources on people that don't want to do that. And even things like, like the free lunch that we get at school or that you guys get at school. And of course, I grew up with free lunch also, is that it's really sad how wasteful we are. So sometimes I think the older you get, and as I see the world differently, because when you're younger, you just see like your neighborhood, and then you get older, and then you see like your city and your community, and then your state, and then I've traveled in different parts of the world and all of that, and going back to Tijuana. Once you cross the border, you see how many people are poor and would love to have all those apples that we leave laying around during lunch, like every day, right? We waste all this food. So I guess what I'm saying is, yeah, if I were king of the world, people would experience music in their lives at some point, and then also I would have a system so that there wouldn't be so much wastefulness in the world. That way, the people that really need it can have it, as opposed to people wasting stuff. And when I say stuff, I mean it's everything because we waste a lot of things, not just food. We waste money and resources and all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I wish people could like see like the different parts of the world where people aren't so lucky to have the things that they have, and
Yeah.
so people are just like ignorant and stuff like that, which really sucks because I wish that they could experience, they could see what life is like in other places where they're not so beneficial.
Yeah. Exactly right. Yeah, and that's the thing, and that's one of the things that requires a lot of perspective. I think one of the things that sometimes I mention, going back to like food, is like sometimes you have pizza and you think, wow, this pizza is really good. And that's because you grew up having, and this is no offense to anybody, but you grew up having like pizza loca, because I grew up with pizza loca right there on Lincoln. And so then, but then you have better pizza. Then you have pizza like from
Pretty good.
BJ's Brewery. I don't know how many of you have been to BJ's Brewery. They have like
Yeah.
really good pizza. And so then and then you're like, wow, this is better. So then that means the pizza you used to like is not so good anymore because you had something better. And then I've been to like Chicago where they have like the deep dish pizza. And so then you have that pizza and you're like, whoa, this is pizza, the way they're supposed to make pizza. And so what I'm saying is something like that, it gives you perspective. It lets you compare one thing to another. And so in order to make some of these world changes, people need to have a lot of perspective. And so some of the people just don't know what they have, and therefore sometimes they don't value it. So I think that's, I mean, so for example, if they wouldn't give out free lunch at school, then people would like probably value that food that they leave laying around every day, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Seeing
All right.
all
So
the different perspectives that you have, your views, all the experiences you've had, what kind of, if you had a theme song to your life, what would it be?
Oh, that's a good one. I think if I had a theme song, it would be On the Road Again. Now that's a really old, or Life is a Highway. I don't know if you've heard that one.
Mm.
Oh
Something
yeah,
that's
it's
like
Oh, that
incredible.
one
you know.
from Cars.
Yeah, exactly. Cars.
Oh my
That's a newer song. On the Road Again is like from the '80s, I think, even before I was born. But yeah, so I think a theme song would be like Life is a Highway, because one, I really love to travel. And that gives me perspective. That lets me see how other people live in other parts of the world and in other places. And also the fact that life is a highway. Sometimes you take a detour, and sometimes it's a good one, sometimes it's not, or sometimes you get lost a little bit, but then you get back on track. And I don't know, for me at least, and maybe some of you will experience this later when you drive, like especially if you take these long drives and you're just on the road and there's like a lot of nothing, but then all of a sudden something comes up, like it's a cool feeling to be on a highway for hours, but appreciating what's happening. Of course, it's boring if you just want to get there, but I think metaphorically speaking, I think since you're asking me the theme song of my life, it would be something like that. Life is a highway. Yeah, that's a good question. I hadn't thought of that.
It's about the journey, guys,
Yeah,
yeah,
not the destination.
the hustle. Okay, so Jose, I think it's Jose Loera.
yeah.
He asked, "What was the worst musical train wreck you've ever been
The worst
Seventh
musical.
grade, seventh grade.
in?"
That's funny.
Watch him name one of our shows.
No, no, no. Well, I guess that's.
Well, anyways,
Um,
continue.
I've seen. Hmm. And I'm not sure what Jose is asking me, but I think the worst musical train wreck that I've been in as a performer, or that I've seen or been as a conductor, because I think that's like I'm thinking two or three different things. But I will I will answer this. Okay, I'll answer it a couple ways then. So the first one that comes to mind is as a performer. One time I was playing with actually a norteño group, because growing up I played in mariachi groups, a cumbia group, of course in college jazz groups, concert band groups. Not too many orchestra gigs because saxophone is not really part of the orchestra, but just different a variety of different ensembles. But of course, one thing that made money that I loved to do was play Mexican music, whether it was mariachi music, conjunto, or norteño, because people played at parties. So one time I was with a norteño band group, and then we went to do a gig, and the lead singers, well, two of the guys that they usually sing all the songs, and it was me and my brother. We were playing trumpets at the time, believe it or not, in a norteño group. But anyway, the singers started drinking one night before the gig, and so we went to go do the gig, and they couldn't even talk.
Oh,
And
nice.
so, like, their voice was gone.
What a night.
And yeah, and the worst part was, so we're on stage and we have to play 2 3 hours worth of music, and they looked at us, me and my brother, and said, "Hey, like, we can barely talk." They were making their voice like they could barely talk, and they're like, "We could barely talk. You guys are gonna have to sing the songs." And I was like, "Are you kidding?" Like, number one, we're not singers, right? Like, we didn't grow up as singers, even though we could sing a little bit because we were trained musicians. But at the same time, it was like, no, there's no way we're gonna be able to sing these songs. Plus, we got our parts to play and all of that. So that was a train wreck. But I say that because that was like an adult train wreck where you think people would be responsible enough to, be good musicians and all of that. And this was an example of they were bad musicians and irresponsible, and they messed up the gig for us bad. So I wouldn't be surprised if they never called them or whoever booked that gig ever again because of that. So that was bad. But then as a as a director in the stands, I do remember on some of you in here are in the drum line. So I will tell you that not our drum line.
Oh,
If you
okay.
find it, I'm going to say this because I don't want to mention the school name because it's not cool. But if you find it, there is a YouTube video that actually ended up on America's Funniest Home Videos,
Oh wow.
um,
Oh,
where one
Whoa.
of the drum lines close by is the way I'm going to put it. They were, the drum line was marching backwards, and the bottom bass, right, the biggest bass, fell because they were marching backwards correctly.
Oh shoot.
And then before you know it, there was like six people on the floor because they couldn't see
Holy
each other.
Oh
crap!
So
Wow.
wow.
all it took was like two drill moves, and there was like six people on the floor, and everybody was like in the audience going, "Whoa!" Like somebody stop this performance, kind of thing.
hmm.
So that was a big train wreck. But fortunately, I'll knock on wood, and I'll say that none of my students' performances have been bad or like that. So, you know, we've had a little
Ivan,
fall every once in a while, but they
please look
obviously
out
they
for
keep
them
going.
next year.
Yeah, there you go. All right.
I don't know what to say.
All right.
Okay, so yesterday Carlos and I asked on social media if anybody has any questions for you because we announced that you were going to be a part of our podcast.
Right.
So uh, Carlos and I are going to switch off questions. So my
Okay.
first question is from Alex Uribe. He asks, "Do you ever wear shorts?"
I hardly ever wear shorts in public. I will to, at the beach and to jump in the pool. But the reason why I don't like to wear shorts is because I don't think shorts look good on tall men. Now, tall women, yeah, because, it's like a thing where you want to see like long legs and all that. But,
Right, 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 right.
Guys, come
but I
on.
think on men,
Be mature
I
about
don't,
this.
yeah, I don't know. Yeah. But every once in a while, but just like around the house.
All
He
right.
has like two pairs.
Right, exactly. 'Cause I have like two pairs.
Oh my god. All right.
What else?
I guess I'll ask. Someone asked who your favorite music artist was growing up.
Oh, that's
That's a tough one.
hard. Yeah, anything about or anytime anybody asks me something about like favorite music, it's really hard because there's so much good music and it's hard to say what's better than the other thing. But I will tell you, growing up, um, one of the first people that I listened to a lot of was actually Elvis. I listened to a lot of Elvis songs, and I really enjoyed them. I enjoyed the rhythm part of it and all of that. So I know it's kind of even for me as I'm thinking about it right now, it's kind of like I have to think like, wait, what else was I listening to at the time? Because growing up, I would listen to a lot of what my parents would listen to. So of course, if they were listening to like Vicente Fernandez, and so was I, and that's why eventually I played in a mariachi group because I liked that music because we grew up with it. But like my music, I think the first time I actually bought like a cassette, back in the early '90s, was like, hey, I want this Elvis cassette, and that was cool. And then after that, I mean, I just started to listen to a bunch of stuff. Um, so I'm gonna say Elvis for now. Yeah.
Cool. Carlos Gonzalez asks, "What do you wish you had known when you started off as a band director?"
Oh, that is a really great question. Um, I think what I wish I would have known was how much work we do as band directors that is not connected to actual music and music performing. And by that, I mean, like I've told you, one of my least favorite things to do of my job is fundraising. Like going back to if I was king of the world, too. If I was king of the world, we wouldn't have to fundraise for things, you know?
There it is.
So fundraising is like, oh man, we have to raise funds and we have to deal with that. So I think that I thought I was going to be working on teaching music like 100% of the time, but really it's more like 60% of the time. 40% of the time, I'm busy doing other things. Everything from, well, since I'm department chair, like, taking care of some of the needs for the department, whether it's the visual art teachers or choir, dance, theater, that kind of thing. Um, or going to meetings that have to do with making sure that we still get PE credit for marching band and things like that. And so sometimes I just take care of different things that don't have to do with what we're playing in the classroom every day, or fixing instruments, things like that. It's like, well, I mean, I don't mind it, but it'd be a lot of fun to not have to worry about fixing instruments, or who's going to drive the trailer to a competition, or getting parents to come in and iron the uniforms, or worrying about the uniform managers having uniforms for us, or things like that are not necessarily like, hey, let's play. So I wish I would have known that. Yeah.
All right, coming from me, um,
Okay.
someone asked in one of my polls, they asked what one job you would absolutely hate to do.
Oh, that's good. um let's see, what one job, as
Or it
I
could be a
think
field.
about it. Yeah, and see, that's the thing. I love helping people. Um, so it'd have to be something opposite of that. So something that has nothing, like no, like no impact on the world, I guess. And I don't mind labor jobs either. I mean, I don't mind doing hard work and sweating and that kind of thing. I mean, of course, I went to school and got an education, so I didn't have to, do like yard work or roofing or construction, because I know that's all hard work. But I think I would probably hate doing jobs where I'm not even noticed. Something like, I don't know, bringing in the carts at Walmart or Target or something.
Wow.
Oh my
I
god.
knew he was gonna say that. I knew he was gonna say that.
That's tough.
Wait, Mr. Garcia, do you know where
Yeah.
Roach works?
Wait, Jose Rocha, is that where you're working?
Yeah, I work at Walmart pushing carts.
Well, the great thing about that, Jose, that here's the other thing about jobs, is that when you get a job like that, and let's admit it, it sucks, but um, it's a good motivator for the next thing. So that means that, I mean, it's going to be fun for a little bit, but then after that, Jose, you want to be like, you know what? No, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to go be a cashier or something. And then after that, you want to be a manager. And then after that, of course, you don't even want to work at Walmart. You should want to work somewhere else where they give you like a retirement plan and stuff like that. So
I'll be the CEO.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So I think there's nothing wrong with doing a job where you start at the bottom and work your way up, and
It's
using
just
it
that.
to motivate you. But like today, if somebody said go push carts, I don't know. I think I would really hate that. Yeah.
I know. It's just that that's like you're always that's like your go-to answer for like anything.
Oh, it is.
Like,
Oh, okay.
like yeah, like literally job related. You're like, it's gonna suck pushing carts at Walmart.
Yeah.
And then literally everyone refers to me because I do that.
Oh man. But see, yours is temporary. That's for sure. Right now, you're gonna outgrow that. Now, if you're still
Yeah.
pushing the carts and you're like 25, well, then there's a problem.
Oh no, trust me. There's like at least two people working with me. They're like, I guess they're like around their 40s, still pushing
Oh
carts.
man. See, that's
That's tough.
that's tough. Yeah.
That is.
Yeah.
No, most definitely.
All
That was a
right.
good question.
That was a very good response.
Okay, Osvaldo Makeda asks thoughts on the effects of the marching band once we return from quarantine.
Well, like I was saying earlier, it just kind of depends on what's happening. Every week something new happens. And again, today the announcement that LAUSD, and also the email that went out, I think on Friday, from our district, AUHSD, said that we're going to start school on time. That's actually good news. But the thing is, and the fact that they're starting to reopen things with new guidelines, that's also good news, because that makes me feel like, well, maybe the worst, I'm not going to say the worst is over, but at least the worst of the quarantine part is over, meaning they're going to start letting us do things again. Um, However, though, there is a possibility, if they're reopening a restaurant and they say, well, you can only be here and be like, again, 6 feet apart or whatever, then maybe they're going to do the same thing for schools. And if they say, well, you can only be 6 feet apart at schools, or they're talking about only letting, half the schools start first and then the other half, and kind of in tracks, kind of like the elementaries do it and all that. or maybe going to school just for 2 days out of the week. All these different ideas right now that are not 100%. So I want to make sure I make that clear. It's not for sure. But that makes me think that when we do reopen schools, I'm getting the feeling that marching band is going to have to also be different. Now, how different? Again, I don't know, because we are outdoors. So if we do outdoors, technically we're not as prone to spreading the virus if somebody was sick, like if we were indoors. But at the same time, I think what's going to change it more is whether we have football games or not, whether there's actual competitions to go to or not. Even if we did just like, the parade ban, well, I don't think any city is going to be hosting a parade anytime soon. So that's the hard part. It's going to be like, what are we going to do based on what opportunities there are to perform? So I hope that kind of makes sense. But that all has to do with performance. As far as actually learning, like I told you guys when this whole thing started, even though we're going to stop going to school, we need to keep learning no matter what. Because otherwise, we can't, just like we took like these 2 months off or whatever, we can't take like a whole year off or a whole season off, because then who knows what's going to happen after that when we do get back on track. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but I think my feeling is that the marching band is going to have to change at least a little bit. Hopefully not a lot of it, but we'll have to wait and see.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a tough call
Yeah.
to make, especially because the future is so unknown.
Yeah. Well, and it
True.
won't be up to me. That's the thing. It won't be up to me. At that point, it'll be up to what they tell us we can and can't do. Yeah.
Yeah. Wait,
All right.
so
So,
are
oh, go ahead, Roach.
sorry. So are the summer rehearsals still gonna be a thing or not anymore, Mr. Garcia?
So I have to wait about another week or two to make that decision. But depending on how things are going, um, we probably will not have our first marching rehearsal with the eighth graders, right after we get out of school.
Yeah.
But I am going to put something on the calendar for like we usually do before band camp. I'd rather
Yeah.
schedule it and then cancel it than not put it on the schedule. So I think I want to go ahead and do that. But as far as that one right at the end of the school year, or at the end of this month, I should say now, because we're in May already, then that one for sure is not going to be on the schedule, because I think that's the week where we're having our virtual graduation. So it's like,
Yeah.
we're still
So
kind of,
they're having it.
yeah, exactly. So we're still kind of having school stuff as opposed to going into the summer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good question.
All right, next question is I don't know how well you know modern rap or anything, but what's your opinion on mumble rap?
On mumble rap. You know what? It's funny because as you ask that question, you're right. I don't know much about that, but I could imagine what it is. The funny thing is what makes things, because that's kind of something that is new, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's funny is what makes things new is the fact that somebody else did it and did it in like a long time ago, and so it just kind of gets brought back. So the first thing I think of is scatting in jazz. If you hear Louis Armstrong play his trumpet, and then he puts his trumpet down, and then he's ba doo ba doo ba ba doo ba da ba da da, right, and he's doing that whole thing. It's what we call scatting. So I would imagine um, that it would be something like that. There's also a jazz tune called Babbles, and that's because oh man, I forget what trumpet player plays that. It's very popular, very famous, and I'm sure we could just kind of Google it. But babbles or mumbles, actually, now that you mention it, babbles, mumbles. Um,
I think I know what you're talking about. It's a guy, he's playing a trump, or I think he's playing a flugelhorn. I think.
yeah, Terry, I think Terry.
Clark Terry.
Yes, Clark Terry. There you go, Clark Terry. So Clark Terry. So if you listen to that jazz tune, all it is a bunch of mumbling. So anyway, I say that because listen to it, and then you listen to this new rap you're talking about, and it's probably gonna have a lot of similarities. But at the same time, yeah, I haven't heard it, so I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly my thoughts on it, because now I'm gonna have to go check it out.
All right.
Okay.
Spencer Bowie asks, "What do you feel about the music industry during this pandemic?"
I think, unfortunately, a lot of people are losing opportunities to make money, because when we say industry, we talk about the way you make music, not just a hobby, but actually make money off of it and be a professional at it. So unfortunately, I think they're probably not going to open up like, the Walt Disney Concert Hall or the Pantages, or the where the Pacific Symphony Orchestra plays here at the Segerstrom, Performing Arts Center or Orange County Performing Arts Center. So all these places, I think, are going to stay closed because they don't want people gathering in large crowds. So unfortunately, with that, um, that means that a lot of people are not going to be making money. However, I know some people are getting really creative and starting to figure out how to do, a lot of recording at home, and then, put it all together. But at the same time, of course, that's not even close to being the same as a live performance. So I just think the music industry is definitely going to take a hit, and all the performing arts industries, anything that takes place on a stage. So hopefully the people that are making soundtracks will probably still get work. But even then, they're not going to open the movie theaters. But nowadays, a lot of people aren't going to the movie theaters anyway because we're streaming movies at home. So hopefully, part of it will still be okay, and that's because of movies. But everything else, I think, is going to be really suffering because they won't be able to go do gigs. So it's unfortunate for them. Yeah. So I think they're trying to find other ways to get some work. Those are my thoughts.
That was like the end of my questions. Most of the sticker responses just asked why you were so cute.
Oh, okay.
Was it from Daniel again?
One of them was.
All right. Well, thank you.
What's our runtime, Carlos?
Currently we're looking at about 40 minutes, an hour almost.
Nice.
All right.
We made a good time. Okay, I have a question over here from Savannah.
Sure.
She asks, "How the heck did we convince you to join this podcast?"
It was that one.
Well, it's an easy answer, Savannah, and for all of you. Um, some of my best students are on this podcast. So if I ask any of you to do anything, whether it's David, Ivan, Carlos, Rocha, or Luis is on here also, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
No, it's okay. If I asked any of you to do anything for me, you would. Therefore, when you asked, I was like, hey, this could be fun, so I'll do something for you too. And especially right now, I have the time. And then you have to understand that sometimes when students ask me, like, hey, will you do this? Will you do that? Well, sometimes when you don't have the time, you don't have the time. But right now, I have the time. So I figured I would join you guys for the podcast, and it would be fun. So I'm glad people are listening in, tuning in.
Yeah, I'm really happy too because this is the most viewers we've ever had.
Oh, that's awesome.
Let's go.
Okay, I have one more question for myself.
Okay.
What got you interested in cars? Because I know you have your Buick, and you keep it nice and shiny and polished.
Yeah, well, one of my hobbies is to tinker around with cars. And I say that because cars are mechanical. And I think one of the things that I'm interested in is just the way mechanics work, the way things work. One of the shows that I watch, which I know may sound a little bit nerdy, but I watch How It's Made sometimes. And it's on the Science Channel, and I think you find it on Hulu. And they basically have these pretty boring shows, by the way. They're not fun at all. I think somebody should tell them how to make those shows fun. But but they're kind of boring, but it's interesting because they show you how something is made. And whether it's a musical instrument or, a light bulb or any random things, they show you the process of all of that. And I think it's really cool to see how something is made from like the raw materials and all of that. So anyway, I think my interest in how things work also gives me my interest in cars because going back to how I grew up, one of the things that my dad did kind of as a side job because he worked every day. And by the way, one of the things that he worked making guitars, and we could always talk about that later, but he worked for the Fender company making electric guitars and basses, which is kind of the only musical connection we have, even though he doesn't play an instrument or anything like that. But he actually did the body works and sanded down the wood. But anyway, so when he would work throughout the week, then on weekends, he would work on cars, and that was to make extra money. So again, to make ends meet, he would change brakes on cars and do oil changes and tune-ups. And so growing up, that was one of the things that I remember. That's a very fond memory of me and my dad. Was like he would get up on we would get up on Saturday morning, say, "Hey, get up, let's go. We're gonna go help. We're gonna go do this job on a car." So when it comes to tools and cars, I am very familiar with tools, and I know how to use all kinds of tools because I learned that from my dad, and I also know how a lot of things work because I learned it from my dad or I grew up with it. So then when I was a senior in high school, he gifted me the 1978 Buick Regal that I have, and that was my first car. And through the years, I've just kept it, even though I've had other cars that have gotten me around, and that old car has just been there. But then when I ended up getting some money and working, I then did a paint job. I did the upholstery, so I kind of fixed it up to kind of make it look nice again and not look like it's from the 70s. But it's got a fresh paint job on it and all that. And so then now throughout the years, I just kind of work on it, and that was one of the things I did this weekend. I actually changed the spark plugs and the spark plug wires on the car because I needed to go get a smog check on it, and so it was, it took me all day to do it, but it was fun. And again, it's work, but when you're doing it as a hobby, it doesn't seem like it's that much work. So therefore, I like cars, and every time there's a car show or every time there's classic cars kind of hanging out, I go and appreciate kind of the workmanship and also kind of like the American spirit in it, if that makes sense. Because I know cars made here in the U.S. are very much like there's a pride to it, not just and it's not to offend anybody, but not like the cars that are being made like in Asia that are kind of they just get you around, but they don't look very nice and they don't have components that are kind of bells and whistles. But the American cars have a lot of that cool stuff in it and ingenuity. So yeah, so that's where I picked up my interest in cars.
Ooh, cool.
Nice. When we started this conversation, I thought we were talking about the movie. So like,
Oh, okay. No, my actual cars, the ones you drive, automobiles.
That's where that's where you got. Life is a highway, Carlos. What do you mean?
Yes. Oh, see, there you go.
All right. So, do we have any other questions from any of the other hosts? Jose, Carlos, Ivan, Luis.
Ivan, have you created your question within this hour?
Let's see. Talking about cars, not the movie.
Yeah.
What would you say is your dream car?
Oh, that's wow. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that really, and I like my '78 Buick. Is it's got emotional attachment again because I was driving it. Like at your age when I was a senior, I took it to prom, that kind of thing. Um, so it's very much an emotional attachment. So I love it because it's mine. But if I didn't have it, and or somehow somebody said, "Hey, choose one of these cars. You can have any car you want," kind of thing. Um, I think either the oh man, it's the '67 Chevy Impala, and I have an Impala, of
mm,
course, that's a 2004, and even that one's
Mm.
older now. But the Impalas were really nice cars, and they're like really long, kind of boat-looking cars. So I like those large cars. Um, every time I see a Chevy Bel Air, also those are from the '50s, like a '54,
Mhm.
'55. Those are real classic-looking cars. So I think if somebody told me that I could just choose one, I think it would be that. Yeah. So I think between an old Impala like from the '60s or a Bel Air from like the '50s, any of those two cars I think are really cool.
What is your opinion on Teslas and like how Teslas are, fully electric and stuff?
I was
Well,
just
and
about to
see,
ask that.
yeah, the interesting thing is this is that I mean, I do believe in progress, even though I love old cars and some things that are classic I think are awesome. So I think it's great that they're trying to do things that are electric. The hard part and the thing that I think is still to be determined is number one, will it be economical? So even though it is a greener car, meaning it pollutes less and all of that because it runs on electricity, um, can we even afford to have it? And if we can't afford to have it, then at that point it's not that good, right? Um, so that's the first thing. But then the second thing is, if we all had electric cars, and then when they break down, what do you do with those batteries and those electric components anyway? And so that's the thing that and I don't know the answer to this. I'm just kind of thinking out loud because some of those battery cells I mean, just like our regular batteries, like our AA batteries, we're not supposed to throw them in the trash can because we don't want them to end up in a landfill. So if we have those large batteries that are in those cars, I mean, what do we do once those things are broken? I don't think we can reuse them and all that. So I think it's a great idea, but I think we still got a long way to go before it's affordable for everyone to use, and also so that it doesn't actually pollute the world because of the components it has in it. Yeah, but other than that, they're really cool. By the way, I mean, they look cool. I like the way they look. If that's what you're wondering.
Yeah. Any other questions? Any other
Let's hear from
questions?
Bernal.
All right.
Oh,
Yeah.
cheers,
Yeah,
Bernal.
Mr. Garcia.
What's up?
Well, where did you get your sombrero ornament, car ornament?
That is a great question. You know, I don't even think they make that anymore or those anymore. I got it about, believe it or not, like 12 years ago. So I actually got it at the indoor swap meet.
Oh,
Yes,
Oh.
I was at the indoor swap
Wow.
meet. There on Anaheim Boulevard, or the Anaheim Marketplace, as it's officially known, right? Um, and there was a car, one of the car booths there, and I saw it, and I was like, "Hey, that's really cool," And anyway, I thought it was different, and that's why I picked it up. And I haven't been able to find one since then. And at one point, I think online there was like a little hats airfreshener.com. By the way, it's an air freshener, in case you're wondering.
Oh, really? What the
Oh,
heck?
what?
So,
What the heck?
yes. So somewhere out in the world, maybe there is one, but I just haven't looked for one lately. So I don't know. Maybe they're readily available on Amazon, and I just haven't looked. But yeah, it's an air freshener. But I got it at the Anaheim Marketplace. There you go.
Dang, that's really cool. I didn't actually think it was an air freshener.
Yeah, it is.
It smells like the Fiestas.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question about your experience with marching band shows and stuff as a director. What has been your best marching show, like between both schools that you worked at? Because I know you worked at Sierra Vista High School and, of course, Anaheim.
Yeah.
So, which one has been your best out of like out of those two, and which one has been your worst?
Oh man, that is a really difficult question. Um, and because the way you ask it best, I don't necessarily mean I don't know if you mean like the one that we got the most success with, because I do have to tell you that these last two shows that we've done, whether it's the Scheherazade show or the To the Moon show, have been really good. And they've been really good because they've just been a great fit for the band and the color guard. So sometimes I've chosen music and then I feel like, oh no, this section's totally going to pull through. And then they don't, And so that's one of the hardest things for me to do when I'm choosing music is, have a lot of faith in one section that maybe has a major role and then somehow it doesn't work out. So I think these last two shows, I wouldn't be able to choose one between Scheherazade and To the Moon, because Scheherazade is classical music. So that had like a lot of, I think, strength to the show. It was really like exciting. But then To the Moon was very familiar, and I think it was very much a crowd pleaser, and people really enjoyed the fact that, you knew some of the songs in the show. So I think these last two would be my best shows. The worst show, the worst show was actually at Sierra Vista High School. We did a show called Moving Across America, and it was a patriotic show, and it had music by Aaron Copland. And Aaron Copland is a big composer of American music, used in a lot of movie soundtracks and things like that. And what made it not go as well as I was hoping was, one, it had a lot of articulation. And for those of you that don't know, or they're in the color guard and you're listening, that means we had a lot of tonguing in the music. And so tonguing is not something that is easy to do. Sometimes people can go and that was the melody. And sometimes some people go right, and you just can't get your tongue to move. So the tonguing made it hard. And I thought we were going to be okay. and we weren't okay because having a lot of band members tongue, it's kind of like having a lot of the drumline members play their drum parts since it's so crisp. So so something as simple as just like playing eighth notes on the drum line and it sounds like one drum. Well, we needed to get the band to sound like one tongue, and that was a challenge. And then since I know we have some color guard members listening, there is a color guard season that fell apart on us, um, and that's just because we had some series of events where there was one season in particular a couple of years ago where we were supposed to have like 8 or 9 seniors in the color guard that year. So it was going to be a great season and a great year. And people made some bad choices. So they ended up getting kicked out of the color guard, suspended from school, expelled from the program. And so all those seniors ended up being like 3 seniors at the end. So anyway, those are some of the successes and fails that kind of come to mind. Yeah.
All right, looks like I think we're heading towards our end.
Yeah.
Unless you guys have any other questions or comments, um, do you?
No,
No.
not really. Not really.
No.
It's about that
Uh,
time.
Bernie, you have some questions?
I was gonna ask. Yeah, I was gonna ask. What was your most memorable um, musical like event? I guess.
Oh man, that's also hard. Most memorable. Wow. See, there's so many. There's so many. I mean, they're most memorable. I the thing is memorable in different ways. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is remember when that whole rivalry football game and they were throwing things and we
Oh
were
yeah, I
playing.
do.
That's like you can't forget that, right?
Great. It was great.
That was memorable in a bad way, right? Like what the heck? Like we got to get out of here. And we left the football game right after halftime because it got out of hand, right?
Oh yeah.
So that's memorable in a bad way. But then memorable in a good way, there's so many. There's so many. I mean, um, there's been times where the jazz band has just had these great performances that it's obvious that we are one of the best jazz bands in the district at like a district showcase, or we go to band spectacular and we just hear, all the other bands get an applause and then we just get like a roar, from people, and or just going to festival and just getting unanimous superiors and things like that, and when the drumline gets a sweepstakes trophy, and when the color guard gets a medal, for their WGASC, and so there's a lot of memorable performances. And so when I mention all those, it's hard to say the most memorable. Um, so I don't know if I can answer that, Luis. That's one of the toughest questions you can ask me. But I think I gave you one of the most memorable for every section. So color guard medaling, drumline getting sweepstakes, right? You know, both symphonic band and wind ensemble getting unanimous superiors. Us even this year just breaking or getting the 91.45 or whatever our score was at the band review when we got moved up a division. Like it's just those things I'll never forget,
yeah.
right? Like it's just really exciting. So yeah.
So if those were the final questions and comments, I think it's time we wrap up this episode of the Daydream Podcast. Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Thank you.
You are very
much
welcome.
for joining
Yeah.
us today.
Yeah. Thank you
Round
for
of
taking.
applause, round of applause.
All right.
Thank you for taking the time.
I'll take a bow, even though you can't see it. Right? Us performers, we applaud and then we bow.
Curls can Photoshop that.
Thank you very much for joining us, and for the viewers at home, thank you for so much for joining us. We love you very much. Stay safe, stay healthy. We'll see you next time. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.